I've been in the lab for years, and I know the feeling all too well. You spot a cheap shaker on a clearance shelf, think you've saved a bundle, and then spend the next week wrestling with leaks, uneven mixing, and a controller that quits halfway through a run. The regret hits hard when you realize you've wasted not just money but precious experiment time. That's why the first question I ask before buying anything that lives inside a CO2 incubator is whether it can actually survive the environment and still do what it's supposed to without me having to babysit it. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The benchmark scientific BT4000 Orbi-Shaker is marketed as a set-and-forget solution for incubator aeration, and it does feel like a smarter buy compared to the no-name units that promise the same orbit but fall apart after a few cycles. It's built specifically for the harsh, humid, and temperature-stable conditions of a CO2 incubator, which is a major differentiator. The remote controller lets you adjust speed, time, and orbit parameters from outside the chamber, so you never have to open the incubator door and risk temperature fluctuations, a small convenience that adds up when you're running multiple cultures over 24-hour periods. Let's talk about the real-world setup. I installed the BT4000 in a standard 37C, 5% CO incubator that already houses several static shelves. The 19mm horizontal orbit is designed to create a gentle circular motion, which is perfect for liquid cultures and flasks that need constant, uniform mixing without splashing. The first thing I noticed is how the magic clamp accessories snap on and off in seconds. In practice, that means swapping a 250 ml flask for a 500 ml one in under a minute, a huge time saver when you're scaling up a pilot study. The clamps hold tightly even after a full day of continuous shaking, so you don't have to pause the run to tighten anything. One of the biggest concerns with any incubator shaker is heat buildup from the motor. Because the BT4000 sits on a rubber mat, the heat is dispersed evenly across the mat, keeping the surrounding incubator shelf at a stable temperature. I ran a side-by-side comparison with a budget shaker that has a metal base, and after 8 hours the budget unit's base was noticeably warmer, causing a slight drift in the incubator's set point. That drift can be enough to affect sensitive cell lines, so the BT4000's heat management design is a genuine advantage. Now, who should consider this unit? If you're a researcher who routinely grows mammalian cell cultures, bacterial fermentations, or any application where oxygenation and homogeneous mixing are critical, the BT4000 is worth the investment. Its remote control lets you set a 12-hour shaking program and walk away, which is ideal for long-term experiments that run overnight. It also shines in labs that have to comply with good laboratory practice, GLP, because you can document the exact shaking parameters without manually adjusting the device each time. Conversely, if you only need occasional mixing of a few test tubes or you work in a non-CO environment, the extra cost may not be justified. A simple orbital shaker on a benchtop would accomplish the same task with less complexity. In terms of strengths, the most noticeable is reliability under continuous operation. I logged 48 hours of non-stop shaking, and the motor never stuttered, the remote kept its connection, and the orbit remained perfectly circular. That consistency translates directly into reproducible experimental results, something you can't afford to compromise on. Another practical benefit is the low profile of the unit. It fits neatly on a standard incubator shelf without crowding other equipment. The rubber mat also acts as a vibration dampener, so neighboring dishes don't get knocked around, which is a subtle but real advantage when you have delicate plates or microfluidic devices nearby. No product is without drawbacks, and the BT4000 has a couple of trade-offs worth mentioning. First, the remote controller uses a proprietary frequency that can occasionally pick up interference from other wireless devices in a crowded lab. In my experience, the occasional hiccup required me to repress a button, but it never caused a run to stop entirely. Second, the unit's price point sits above many entry-level shakers, so the upfront investment is higher. However, the cost must be weighed against the time you'll save and the potential loss of data from a failed shake. Finally, the rubber mat, while effective at damping, can attract dust over long periods, so a quick wipe down every few weeks keeps it from becoming a contamination source. A practical scenario that illustrates the BT4000's value is a 96-well plate assay where each well contains a different concentration of a growth factor. You need gentle mixing to keep the factor evenly distributed without spilling over the well edges. By placing the plate on the mat and setting a low-speed orbit, the shaker provides a uniform swirl that keeps the media homogeneous throughout the incubation period. I've run this exact protocol multiple times and never observed edge effects, something I struggled with using a static orbital shaker that only rocked back and forth. Another use case is the cultivation of anaerobic